they still have the ammunition to invest in true business model changes. They're just not doing it. Farfetch is doing 1/10 the volume and is not even profitable and is worth about 60% the value of Macys. Stock price is going in one direction. It's called down. How can you go and really supercharge yourself with a marketplace model? You've got to buy. Let's talk about Macys. Someone that, they've done good e-commerce. They're a top 10 e-commerce website. They're doing over $5 billion in e-commerce. It's impressive, but they haven't embraced marketplace. We covered maybe a couple months ago, we looked at the amount of clothes that you could buy on Macys versus Amazon. It's not even close. It's like 100x difference. If I can buy a few 100,000, say, women's clothes on Macys, I can literally buy tens of millions of clothes for women in just, say, 10 categories of clothing, not even the whole women's department. It's not even close in terms of the breadth of product catalog. You're now seeing Amazon roll out a bunch of, friendly features around buying clothing and being able to return it, or even friendly financing options. So you don't even need to pay for some of it. You can try it on without paying for it. And they're really juicing this model of shopping online for clothing. And meanwhile, Macys is just taking the existing business model and putting it online. Surprisingly, with a lot of e-commerce demand, that if they did decide to open up to third-party supply and did allow for a more curated experience with a broader inventory, building out functionality specifically for that kind of clothing shopping experience, I actually think that they could do well in that space. But they're really not embracing the marketplace business model for whatever reason. And so they're putting these plans into place to, close 125 stores, which is about a quarter of their whole overall locations. And so they're doing all this to save $100 million. So they're going to basically turn away $1.4 billion in annual sales, and they expect to save $1.5 billion. This is by the end of 2022. So it's saying we're going to do all this stuff now, and in 2 or 3 years, we'll save $100 million. Macys isn't losing money, right? Like, they did $5.3 billion in revenue. They made $50 million. That's in Q3. But if you look at Feb, so this is Q4 of last year, right? Which they announced Feb of 2019. They had revenue of $8.7 billion. That's the big holiday shopping quarter. And they made $885 million in profit. And then the subsequent, they made 168 in profit, and after that, 158 million in profit. So it's a profitable business. They still have the ammunition to invest in true business model changes. They're just not doing it. And literally, all the numbers are declining. Everything is red and a down arrow on these numbers. Now, let's look at Farfetch. Farfetch doesn't even have a PE ratio because they don't make any money. You need earnings for the E for that to even qualify. They don't have it. They're still losing money. From a financial standpoint, they did about $255 million in revenue in Q3 of 2019, and they lost $75 million. But that is not the full story. So again, Farfetch is a marketplace. They're in Plaid. So they did in Q3 $255 million in revenue, but they did $492 million in GMV. And that was an increase of $182 million year over year. So it's about a 58% growth rate year over year compared to the Walmart growth rate, right? That's a lot of growth. That's significant growth. If Walmart had 58% growth, oh boy, you're going to see that PE multiple shoot way up, right? So, but they're still losing money. But when you look at it, brass tacks, throughput, revenue to GMV, and you annualize this, now again, the holiday season should be higher. But let's just say if Macys is doing about $20 to $23 billion in revenue annually, and let's say Farfetch is doing $2 to $2.3 billion annually, it's a tenth throughput wise. valuation-wise, Farfetch is valued at $3.7 billion. By the way, far below where they IPO'd at, which was like $27. And Macys is valued at $5 billion. The company is doing 1/10 the volume and is not even profitable and is worth about 60% the value of Macys. Right? Like, what else do you need to do to say, there's something about this business model called marketplace, where Farfetch doesn't take any inventory on their balance sheet, where it's all these third-party designers and boutique shops that are posting inventory into the marketplace, that the market's clearly, and they have the growth in that business model. Could Macys... Macys, could try to acquire Farfetch, but there's also other boutique clothing marketplaces, vertical specific clothing or sneaker or apparel marketplaces that Macys could look at buying. And I think that's the best shot that they've got. I think you got to use the multiple that you have. Look at the stock price. This thing was $70 in 2015. It's now 16. Stock price is going in one direction. It's called down. How can you go and really supercharge yourself with a marketplace model? You've got to buy. You've got to either buy another marketplace, or you've got to buy some tools, some SaaS tools, some seller tools, some businesses that are really good at giving suppliers like clothing retail, clothing manufacturers or designers or boutique shops. How can you kind of capture that supply and integrate it into your e-commerce experience and turn the e-commerce into a marketplace? You've got to embrace marketplace. It's the only shot you've got. You're closing down a quarter of your stores, and you're doing all that to save $100 million. What else are you going to do to make up for the $1.4 billion in revenue that you just got rid of to save $100 million? You want to see growth? It's in the marketplace. They're growing at 58% year over year. So we'll see. It's not easy. Look at Walmart. It's not easy, but it's certainly better than the alternative, which is they just got downgraded to junk bonds. And so now if I need to go do an acquisition, now I got to finance that acquisition with junk bonds, because if I'm Farfetch or if I'm this other clothing marketplace, I don't want Macys stock. I want cash. Well, your balance sheet, right? One of those, what are the assets? What's that dry powder that traditional incumbents can use to go and spin out new platform business models? One of those key assets is called the balance sheet. And the balance sheet for this business, I don't think it's going to look any prettier a year from now. Hi, this is Alex from Winner Take All. Thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the content. Feel free to leave a comment, ask us questions, and definitely make sure to join us on our next live stream.